Hello, welcome to the Vineyard Church podcast. For more information, visit us at vkcwest.com.
We've been walking through a series called Kingdom Living. We're looking at the way that Jesus calls us to live, the way that things will be in the future, like in the fullness of the kingdom of God, where everything is as God wants it to be. That's where we're headed. But he calls us to live that way now, even though we're surrounded by brokenness, even though we are broken, even though, it's just the norm isn't the way Jesus calls us to live. He says, you live that way now, even though the environment isn't set up for that. And so what he's addressing in this next few weeks is he's talking about there's an old righteousness, which is, hey, if you just don't do this thing, you're good. And he says, hey, I've heard it say, don't do this, and if you don't do that, you're okay. But I say this. And what he does is he digs deeper into the hearts of people and shows that our hearts are the real issue. It's just not always the outward act. And so Jesus is pushing towards asking us to allow our faith and our belief, allow it into the real areas of our life. Don't just make it about I have my religious self and then I have my normal self. But to allow him to come into all the areas of our lives. And the areas that we're looking at today are two very personal areas. So it's perfect that the high school students are in here for the first time as we talk about sexual desire and divorce. You guys ready? It's right on, I'm like, perfect, all right. How awkward can we make it? It's already awkward, right? But then that's just, it's how we roll. So it's the way Jesus lined it up in the sermon. He went from anger and talking about anger and how anger ultimately leads to murder. And then today he's talking about how lust ultimately leads to adultery and how hard hearts ultimately lead to divorce. And so he's addressing the brokenness of humans relationally. So these are personal topics and typically topics that we even say, well, what does Jesus have to do with these things? And yet Jesus, remember, he created all of this. He started it. He pressed play. And so he's intimately involved in all these areas. So I will say this. I probably am going to say something that you're going to disagree with, without a doubt. But stay with me. Or I'm going to push on something that is maybe a little raw. Stay with me, okay? This is a place, there's no condemnation here. This is a place where we walk out, where we learn, where we're learning from Jesus, because that's what he invites us to. So I've entitled today's message, Honest Love, because Jesus is calling his original hearers and he's calling us into something that is actually honest when it comes to love. Because when it comes to love, we play all kinds of games. We tell ourselves stories, we sell ourselves, we justify things. We have all these games that we play with ourselves when it comes to love, sexual desire and marriage and divorce and those things. So honest means to be free of deceit and untruthfulness. So honest is sincere. One of all of our greatest longings is for intimacy, is for oneness. And so it's bigger than just sexual desire and marriage and divorce. It's this longing for intimacy, this need for intimacy that we all have, is to be one with other people, is to be truly seen, truly known by somebody else, and truly see and know someone else. So in our brokenness, we really a lot of times have blind spots. And so we really need direction. We need someone to show us the way. And so I was thinking about one of my adventures this week. I installed a ceiling fan because another ceiling fan in one of our rooms died, and it was going bad. And I found out why a little bit later. But so I put up lots of ceiling fans. I'm like, I can do this, and so I do it and got it up record time. I'm just flying. I know how to do this. I always get the same fan from the same type of fan from the same company because they do things the same way. So I get it up, flip the switch, sparks pop. No joke, not just kind of a little bit, but sparks flying onto the carpet, and I'm like, oh no. That's never happened before. And so I kind of get up there and fix the little things. I'm like, no problem, good, and then everything's fine, and then pop, sparks, flame. It's just a bad thing. And so I called Brandon Teasley, Top Dog Electric. He does some stuff here at the church as well too. And he told me to give him a shout out, so I just did. And so, but Brandon's great, because all the time people are all over Facebook, oh, Brandon Teasley, because he hops in when you need an emergency. So Brandon came the next day, and he gets done, and so I'm just thinking, I had actually fixed it with what I thought. I said, okay, we're good. I said, but I want you just to confirm that we're good. And what happens instead is Brandon's up there, he goes, oh, let's do this, and all of a sudden he flips it, and the thing pops and sparks. I'm like, see? But what he found out was that there was something that was happening with the wires deeper down beyond the box, and it was actually something that probably killed the previous fan. And so, we could have had a house fire. And I was just ready. I sat there going back and forth. Should I have him come? Should I not have him come? I know what I'm doing. I'm a competent person. I've done this a bunch of times. I know, But in actuality, he found out and he fixed all the wires and probably saved us from a house fire possibly down the line, right? And so I needed a master, somebody that really knows what they're doing, not a hack, to come in and show me something. Isn't that like our sexuality in our marriage and divorce relationships? No, we're good. But there's sparks and there's things and there's fires and, and all the stuff. And so take that approach as we walk into what Jesus says today. Now, it's important for the context is that the people of Jesus' day that Jesus is speaking to, their entire thoughts about sexuality and marriage and divorce were informed by Moses. And so Moses said, do not commit adultery, and also, do not divorce. And so what Jesus does is he sits down on the mountain like Moses. He brings up Moses' teaching, and this is all familiar to them. But then he says, now, that's the buoy that you usually swim out to. Let's go to deeper water. Because it's actually much bigger and much beyond what you think Moses really meant. Because Moses meant what Jesus meant. But it turned into something that they had tweaked all the teaching into something else, it was all about permission. Well, okay, so this is the edge of the cliff. How close can I go to the edge without going off? How can I, what's the flaws in the thinking here so that I can just really push by and what can I get away with? And so they were informed by Moses. I need to ask you today, who or what is informing or has informed your sexuality or your views of marriage or divorce? Like, who's your teacher? I know for me, like growing up in the 80s, like coming from a broken home and, just watching TV and stuff, it was all these movies, and you watch movies and you see relationships and you see people act a certain way, like, oh, is that how it's supposed to be? And I thank God I met Jesus in my teens and I started to be informed in a different way. I started to learn the way of Jesus. Oh, this is the design. But right, we're even bombarded more than that. It's not just movies or TV, it's social media, it's culture, all these things saying to us like, hey, this is the way you do this. And let me just tell you, you're kind of like, oh, here it comes. He's going to tell me what I can't do. No, you can do whatever you want. But it's just whether it's going to hurt or not. I tell the story, Cooper's right here, but when he was two, I'm barbecuing, and he's out near the barbecue, and I'm bringing the food in. He's over near the barbecue, and he's sitting there like this, and the hot barbecue's right here, and he's looking, and I said, that's hot, it will burn you. And he goes, burn? What's that? Hot dog, and so, okay? And so, so you can do it, but that's the whole point of sin. We think it's just like this thing where God says, hey, you can't do that. We're like, man, it's so restrictive. And no, why does God say? Because that way hurts. That way causes damage. It hurts us and other people. And so let's listen to what Jesus says about sex and marriage. So first we see that he's pushing towards an honest sexuality. So you have heard that it was said, This is Matthew chapter 5, verse 27. You shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. So you shall not commit adultery, in verse 27, is the 27th commandment given by God to Moses, to the people of Israel, to us, followed through. But the rabbis and the Pharisees, what they did is they wanted to limit the territory that actually went to just, if you don't actually do the physical act of adultery, you're fulfilling that command, you're all good. But do not commit adultery goes way beyond that. Current to Jesus' day, the term adultery would have included any sexual activity outside of the love-based marriage relationship designed by God, whether by married or unmarried. So someone, according to the Pharisees and rabbis, could claim spiritual or sexual purity if they had only had sexual relations with their own spouse. And so that was the current system. Jesus takes them out further to something like showing them more particular, which has to do with heart. So Jesus states that sexual purity begins in the heart, not by whether I do or don't do something. And so Jesus draws everyone in close, and essentially he's asking this. He's saying, what would you do? What would you do if you were given the opportunity? If everything just aligned and you could do something, and let's say even nobody would find out or whatever. That's where he's going. He's saying, hey, what would you do if you had the opportunity, and that's the true condition of your heart towards this idea of adultery? It's not just whether you've done this physical act. Your true state of where you stand in this in regards to other people and to God is that. So Jesus states that he's really dealing with the heart. And why does he do this? Well, Mark chapter 7, verse 23, he expands on this idea of the heart. He says, what comes out of a person is what defiles them. For it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come: sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All these evils come from inside and defile a person. So every sexual practice which is outside of God's design in action is also outside of God's design in thought as well. Or look. That's what Jesus is saying. And you sit there and say, wow. All right, you got me. You got me, Jesus. You have my attention. This really requires all of me. And what's interesting is that Jesus isn't getting rid of sexual desire, but he's talking about controlling it. And he shows us how, and the rest of the New Testament shows us how as well, but he's asking us to link up with him in that. The interesting thing is, it may feel like sexual desire is this, just this out of control, man, why do I feel this way? Why do these things? Well, in reality, God designed us that actually he wired us for sexual desire, sexual fulfillment, but also sexual fidelity. He actually wired us chemically to actually have those desires, but then once those desires are interacted with and acted upon, we actually chemically are to link up with that person. He's designed it that way. There's actually 3 chemicals that happen when there's any sexual activity: dopamine, oxytocin, and vasopressin. And so they tell our brain, this is enjoyable, I like this, and also here's the interesting thing. I want to do this more with this person that I'm doing this with, and they are mine, and I am theirs. In a real crude, quick manner, that's what's going on within us when we have sexual desire, whether it's thoughts, or actually the action of those things, those chemicals are what's going on inside of us. Powerful stuff. Powerful stuff. But we're wired for actually fidelity. It's actually wired to go deeper and deeper with one person within the marriage relationship. And so that's why when we have feelings of like guilt or dirtiness, like if we have, sexual thoughts or we actually act upon those or do those things, that's why we feel guilt or dirtiness, because it's your brain's way of saying, I'm confused. I'm confused. Like all of these chemicals and these things, my design is telling me that this is for this, but something else is happening here. It's not within those bounds. And so, one person, people have gone to all kinds of lengths. Like, it's horrible, like what men have done to women over time. It's just like, well, then we just need women to cover up, and then we're not going to lust, or that sort of thing. And it's actually everybody's own responsibility. And that's what Jesus gets to, is that we actually all manage ourselves. It's our own responsibility to not objectify anybody. And also, too, it's our own responsibility that we would not put ourselves in a place that we would be objectified. So we all have a personal responsibility with that. And that's what Jesus is getting at. And so Jesus illustrates, like what an extreme issue this is by saying, hey, if your eye causes you to sin or your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. He's not literally saying that. Some people have taken it that way. But here's the problem. You could literally cut off like all of your limbs. You could gouge your eyes out. You could do all those things, and you'd just be like this stump of a person. And your heart could still be off. That's the point he's making. But he's saying, take out the eye, the thing that causes you to look. Take off the hand, causes you to do. And he's basically saying, spatially, take yourself out of the place of temptation so that you can actually function in a place that's healthy with these things. And, when it comes to like pornography, all of those chemicals that I talked about, if someone is viewing pornography, are engaged. And so pornography is a rampant problem within the world for men and women. And what's happening is, studies have shown, what we're learning is that actually when people go to be into a marriage relationship and actually want to enjoy that which God has given them to enjoy and to have that intimacy with other people, they're damaged because they've rewired their brains that this fake thing where I objectify someone or people is what's real and is what they're tied to. And so when they actually go to within God's design, they can't enter in, and it causes all kinds of problems. And so that's why Jesus goes to the extent and says, hey, this is damaging. This is absolutely damaging. And it's a lifelong damage. It's long term. But we have to look at it and say, it will always damage you. That's what Jesus is trying to say if you go outside of what God designed. And a funny example of this, that it will hurt, is I have a friend, and when we were young, he was running with his dad. And so they were just jogging along on the street, and there was a beautiful woman on the other side of the street. And so the dad is jogging, and he starts to kind of look. And he's looking, like just long time looking at this woman. And he runs straight into a sign. Just like full body, head, smack, boom, falls on his back. And he gets up and he says, let that be a lesson to you, son. And so, it's funny, but that's really ultimately what happens, is that if we develop this way of thinking, that's ultimately what happens. So a question is, will you allow your belief and faith or Jesus himself into your sexuality? Because he's not pushing you away here and saying, go perform. He's saying, I am the teacher. I want you to be informed by me on this. And you may say to yourself, well, yeah, but you're saying this and I don't agree. Or you're saying this, or I think something different. Listen, God wants to walk with you. It's so evident all the way from Genesis to Revelation. He wants to walk and talk with people. And so come along with him and be in relationship and talk with him. Bring your doubts, bring your disagreements, bring all of those things to him and walk with him and learn from him. That's what he desires of us. And so next we go to marriage. So in verse 31, it said, "It has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate," wait, hold on. I got messed up here. "But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery. And anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery." So in marriage, God designed people to experience love, fulfillment, and much more. But it can become something that's full of strife and bitterness, can it? It absolutely can go to a different place. And so there was a current debate amongst two different rabbis. There was Rabbi Hillel and there was Rabbi Shammai. And Hillel was actually much more permissive, and he taught that a man could divorce his wife for something as simple as burning the food. And so just like, hey, you're just fully in the driver's seat. If you find that, you can do that. Shammai, he taught much more rigorously that you actually cannot divorce except for just the most grievous of offenses. And where does Jesus line up? Jesus lines up much closer to the second, which is, unless there's the most grievous of offenses, no divorce. But here's what Jesus is addressing. Number one, he's addressing marriage. The people were focused on divorce, what's permissible, but Jesus is trying to bring marriage into the picture. He's trying to refocus them on the idea of what God created. And so he's trying to focus them on the covenant of marriage. The debate, by the way, was Deuteronomy 24, and there's this line in there which says, it says something indecent about her. So you can divorce your wife if there was something indecent about her. So they would go back and forth on that. Well, what's included in that? Well, it's only for sexual immorality, or it's only for this type of sexual immorality, or like, Hillel, she does anything wrong, it's there. And so it's just picking apart this thing. And you can imagine they're just focused on how can we just tweak this thing the way that we want it. And so Jesus illustrates the mess of divorce by pointing out the falling of the dominoes of brokenness, right? He says, hey, if you don't give this certificate of divorce, or if you actually don't only divorce for this, then you actually cause the other person to commit adultery. He's just saying, like, look, if you think it's not a mess, it's absolutely a mess. Divorce absolutely is a mess. And again, it's the same idea of just it damages. It just absolutely does. And so it's important for us to read what Jesus says in another encounter because he gives us more of his thoughts. So Matthew 19, verse 3 says, "Some Pharisees came to him to test him. They asked, 'Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason?' 'Haven't you read,' he replied." So he doesn't answer the question. He points them back to Scripture. "That at the beginning, the Creator made them male and female. And said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. And the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." "Why then," they asked, "did Moses command that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce and send her away?" Jesus replied, "Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard. But it was not this way from the beginning. I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another woman commits adultery." So now he puts it back on the man. He says, if you divorce her for anything like this, you make her someone in adultery. But now he says, if you do that, you put them in that place. So the certificate of the divorce, too, to show you how messed up they got with Scripture and also to say, oh, we can do that too, is that they thought that what Moses was saying is that if there's sexual morality in the marriage, let's say a wife with a husband, then you have to divorce them. That's God's command. And yet Jesus is saying, like, because of your hard hearts, because you will get so nasty to each other if you don't soften your hearts, he makes it in the sense that if you are going to divorce, you have to do that because it was to protect the woman. That she could actually get remarried again, that she could actually provide for herself, that she actually would be protected. But Jesus brings clarity and shows that it's an accommodation for hard hearts. And think about it this way as far as the damage that divorce does. And think of like 2 sheets of just like school-bound paper. And put some glue on there, just coat it up real good around the edges in the middle and put it together. Let it sit, let it dry. Long enough that they truly are joined together. And then now take them apart. That's divorce. You're not going to get a clean break. You're not going to get this sheet fully whole, and this sheet is not going to be fully whole as well. And so that's what Jesus is pointing out. He's pointing out like, hey, you guys are like trying to figure out like, let's focus on divorce and let's find this way and this way. And he's just saying like, you guys need to know that this is damaging for all of time. And so let's get into specifics a bit because there's probably questions. There's real experiences here amongst us and questions about marriage and divorce. The first thing is this, is that, and I do this anytime somebody comes to me and says, hey, we want to get divorced. I say, okay, well, tell me how you met. And it's the most incredible thing. You'll see these people that are just ready to try to tear apart their lives, and all of a sudden, you'll even see moments of joy and moments of happiness and moments of remembering and moments of, wasn't that special? And then, okay, well, tell me about your marriage. And then we try to lead into forgiveness and reconciliation. Because I will say this, the importance is that a lot of people that are focused on divorce, the problem is they're divorcing from something that wasn't God's design. They're divorcing from something that wasn't set up in what God intended. And so I've seen this numerous times is actually, if you can get people to actually understand the covenant of marriage that God designed and what it can be, you can actually have one couple that was divorcing and they should divorce that previous marriage. And they actually step into a new marriage together that is actually built upon God's design and reconciliation and forgiveness. And it's actually this intimacy and this closeness of God's design of like real community. It's actually possible. And so, first of all, make sure that, if you say to yourself, well, we need to get a divorce, or somebody's getting a divorce. Well, do you have a real marriage? In other words, like, are your presumptions and what you agreed upon, is it really what God intended? Because in other words, you may just be saying, I'm going to run from something, but the whole design was broken. In other words, it's like you have some instructions, you're going to put it together and go through these things, and you left all these parts out. That's why it doesn't work. Well, let's see if it works with these parts in there before we say this thing just doesn't work. And so some specifics, because there could be some questions, is that Jesus is teaching that divorce is always against God's design, meaning it causes damage. But consider this and understand this. An unsafe and abusive marriage is never to be fostered for the sake of marriage. And I understand too, in this room, you may have had somebody tell you that if you were in a hard situation. I've had colleagues of mine tell people that, and I tell them, no way. No way. And so if two people really want to reconcile and there is abuse and it's an unsafe situation, it's better to do that from separate camps and see if you can pull that together. You don't just keep somebody in a situation that is abusive for the sake of marriage. That's not marriage. The divorce has already happened. After divorce, marriage is possible for the offended and the offendee. So if you did something that committed adultery, those things, you can be remarried. You can be remarried again, or you had that done against you. You can be remarried. But it's all about the condition of your heart. And again, you can do whatever you want, but it's just, is there going to be carnage or not? And so if you just bring the same person and there's not real searching, swimming out past the regular buoy, if you bring that same broken person, that same broken ideas about relationships and sexuality and about marriage, you bring that same person into another marriage, what do you think is going to happen? Same thing. And it happens over and over and over again. And so Jesus is calling to a real place of actually changing the way we view those things. Ultimately, what Jesus is calling us to is an honest love, right? We talked about that. How can we be honest about sexuality? How can we be honest about marriage? Realize he's not condemning you. He's not pushing you away. You know, this hits home for all of us. But he's not condemning you. He's not pushing you away. He's actually drawing you in. Come and learn. That's what he's doing. But again, let's go back to that key question because this is important. Who has been or what has been your teacher in regards to sexuality and marriage? It's really important to identify. What or who has taught you and what or who is teaching you now? We're barraged by images and we're barraged by ideas just constantly. And so what is teaching you? What is leading you? What is your model or who is your model for sexuality, for marriage? Jesus says squarely that he would like to teach you. He designed it. He's the master. And he invites you in to walk with him in that. Here's the problem, though. You know, current culture around us has decided that the most important thing about somebody is their sexuality. Isn't that right? I'm like ad nauseum. No. Who is this person? We're not defined completely by our sexuality. And Jesus actually counters that, and he says this. He says, actually, au contraire, the most important thing about somebody is what or who they worship, because that informs how they live out their sexuality and marriage. That's the important thing, is what's informed. The current culture mindset is like a free-for-all in the things we're talking about. It's a grand experiment of redefining and applying and working through all these things. And you say, well, okay, so scientifically, let's test it. There's more emotional, physical, sexual abuse than there ever has been. We're more broken than we ever have been. The freedom of just doing whatever we want and whatever feels good is breaking us. It's not helping. Doing whatever we want, calling things whatever we want is not helping. It's breaking our very fabric of our intimacy with one another. And so Jesus says, let's talk. Come in and let's talk and walk with me and walk this out. That's what's interesting is even though Jesus says statements like this, I found that there is an urgency, but when I actually interact with Jesus, he's not in a hurry. You know, when I've blown it or done stuff, I'm just like, oh Lord, oh man, I tell you what, I'm just horrible. And Jesus says, hey, have a seat. Let's talk. Let's walk this through. Because we don't get ourselves into messes overnight, and we don't get ourselves out either. So Jesus walks with us and walks through with things. And so if you would say today, hey, I'm messed up, I'm broken, I have, the ideas I have about these things, I'm pretty darn sure they're not that of Jesus's. Come to him and learn from him. Read his word, talk to him, talk to other people, walk through those things. Now, I do need to say this. Some of us are saying, yeah, that's right. That's what I believe. You are on trial too. Because that reveals you're not going past that buoy that's just set up near the shore. Jesus is calling you deep. Jesus is calling you to the place of, let's really walk through what you truly believe, what you're truly walking out with this. And remember, Jesus is calling us into his kingdom, calling us to live the future now, the way things ultimately will be. And so if we're comfortable doing things sexually or relationally, marriage-wise or other things outside of God's design, we won't be comfortable in the kingdom. Because it damages us, it damages other people, and it damages our relationship with God. And so what Jesus is really saying is that he created sex and love, and he's saying, come and see how he intended them to be. Can you learn from him? And if you think of yourself an expert, just think of me with my ceiling fan. Just think of me that I didn't see things I couldn't see because I'm not that expert. I needed someone to come in. So it is with Jesus. And so what would the world be like if we all invited Jesus into our sexuality? If we all invited Jesus into our marriages and we walked those things out the way he would have them? Psalm 25 verse 4 says, show me your ways, Lord. Teach me your paths. And there is a progression to this. Society and culture would tell you to just go get yours. Just go live it out. Go do this, especially when it comes to sexuality and marriage. Just do whatever feels good, do whatever's right. But there's actually a progression. And I want you guys to really hear this because I heard this when I was just a little bit older than you, is there's a progression. If you want to be healthy today, if you're tired of unhealth in any of these areas, walk out this progression and keep listening to Jesus through it. Here's the first one. It's 3 M's. The first one's master. Is Jesus your master? Brandon Teasley, Top Dog Electric, is my master electrician, He says to me, he goes, man, I just saved you. And I'm like, I think you did. But is Jesus your master? It's okay to talk and have discussions about things and work things through, but ultimately, is he Lord? Is he master? The next thing is mission. Be on mission with him. In other words, live your life the way Jesus would live your life and be on mission with him. Care about the things that he cares about. Walk the things that he walks through and focus on that reconciliation that's happening in the world. Then the third thing is mate, the things we're talking about today. Master, mission, mate. If you guys set that in your life for you, you'll sidestep some of the pitfalls that maybe we've walked through. Master, mission, and mate. That's the order that Jesus has set up. And so I want to bring it back to my preface. This is incredibly hard to talk through. There was moments where I'm like, let's skip to the next one. But this is the brokenness in our world, and we a lot of times keep Jesus out. Why? Because we love our rights. As Americans, we absolutely love our rights. We just say, well, I have a right to this, and I have a right to this, and I want this, and I want to do this. And Jesus says, you can do that, but look at the damage it's doing. And so invite him in absolutely into these areas of your lives.
Thanks for listening this week. If you are looking for ways to serve, give, or get connected, go to vkcwest.com.